Hello everyone, how are you all? This is part 3 of the adrenal series, and if you have not seen the earlier lectures, I suggest to please see the part 1 and 2 of the adrenal series to understand the concept of this disease in a better way. Today we are going to discuss adrenal insufficiency and Addison's disease in details. So let's get started. So this is today's topic, adrenal insufficiency and Addison's disease. You must be aware of the HPA axis, which this picture is showing. HPA means H from hypothalamus, P is for pituitary, and A is adrenal glands. So what happens in this disease, in adrenal insufficiency, is, as the name suggests, adrenal insufficiency. That means adrenal is not working properly to create enough amounts of adrenal hormones. The hormones are insufficient in quantity. So as you can see, from hypothalamus, corticotrophin releasing hormone is secreted, which stimulates the pituitary gland, the anterior pituitary, to release ACTH, that is adrenocorticotropic hormone. This is a trophic hormone which again stimulates the adrenal glands. This pyramidal shaped, flattened pyramidal shaped gland present on the upper pole of the kidney to secrete various steroid hormones according to the area affected. That means adrenal cortex has three zones, zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and zona reticularis. So zona glomerulosa secretes mineralocorticoids, that is aldosterone, and zona fasciculata secretes glucocorticoids, that is cortisol, and zona reticularis secretes androgens. So all the three zones are affected in this disease, in adrenal insufficiency, and mainly cortisol, which is necessary for life, deficiency of which is fatal for life. So this is not secreted in this disease. Actually, both the terms are interrelated. Adrenal insufficiency is a bigger term which includes Addison's disease also. Addison's disease is a part of adrenal insufficiency, which we will understand better in the coming slides. So from this slide, we came to know about the HPA axis, which is the basic of knowing the diseases of adrenal gland. So now let's move on to the next slide. So a small introduction about adrenal insufficiency is that inadequate amounts of cortisol and or aldosterone and androgens. So any kind of combination, maybe only cortisol deficiency is there, or cortisol plus aldosterone deficiency is there, or all the three hormones are deficient. So any permutation and combination can happen in adrenal insufficiency. It is potentially fatal and notoriously variable in its presentation. So the deficiency is fatal. That means it can cost you your life, and notoriously variable in its presentation. The presentation can be acute as well as chronic. A high index of suspicion is therefore required in patients with unexplained fatigue, hyponatremia, or hypotension. These three are the key features of adrenal insufficiency. These symptoms may be present in other diagnosis also, but if these three are present together, a high index of suspicions is needed because the disease is fatal. So now we move on to the etiology of adrenal insufficiency. The etiology of both adrenal and Addison's will be discussed in the following slides. So this is the etiology for adrenal insufficiency. The etiology may be primary, secondary, or tertiary. We call the disease primary when the disease is inside the gland. That means, in this case, the disease is present inside the adrenal cortex. That means some intrinsic factors are working to destroy the gland and its secretion of hormones. And we call it secondary when the cause lies outside the adrenal gland. That means maybe in the hypothalamus or in the pituitary. So that the ACTH is affected, which now due to its decreased amounts will not stimulate the adrenal cortex appropriately. So secondary we call it when the disease lies outside the adrenal gland, especially with decreased ACTH. That means the disease may lie in both hypothalamus or pituitary. And tertiary when specifically hypothalamic disease is causing decreased corticotropin releasing hormone. Right? Primary when causes in the adrenal gland with increased amounts of ACTH. The cause may be idiopathic. Idiopathic means unknown cause. Addison's disease. Addison's disease is autoimmune adrenalitis. Congenital adrenal hyperplasia. That means the disease is present since birth and there is hyperplasia in the adrenal gland and it hampers the enzymatic processes to secrete the hormones, steroid hormones, that is the cortisol, aldosterone and androgens, and some tumor in the adrenal gland. Right? And in secondary, the cause is outside the adrenal gland with decreased ACTH. And the most common cause is pituitary adenoma. And the second is Sheehan syndrome, in which there is pituitary necrosis after postpartum hemorrhage. Tertiary we call it when disease is inside the hypothalamus with decreased CRH. And second is withdrawal of suppressive glucocorticoid therapy. That means the patient has some other disease for which he is taking the steroids or the glucocorticoids, and sudden withdrawal of those medicines will cause now adrenal insufficiency. Right? So, to summarize, three types: primary, secondary, and tertiary. Primary when cause is in the adrenal gland, and secondary and tertiary when cause is outside the adrenal gland. This is to show the biochemical changes in primary, secondary, and tertiary types. In primary type, there are adequate amounts of CRH and ACTH as there is no problem in hypothalamus and pituitary, but there is problem in the adrenal gland. So, adrenal gland is not secreting adequate amounts of steroid hormones. In secondary, what happens? There is disease in pituitary, so that CRH is in adequate amounts, but ACTH is decreased. If ACTH will be decreased, so it will not stimulate the adrenals appropriately and so the adrenal glands will not secrete the steroid hormones in enough quantity. And in tertiary, basically the disease is in the hypothalamus, so that there is decreased corticotrophin releasing hormone, and in the consequence there is less stimulation of the pituitary gland, so as to cause the decreased ACTH and decreased adrenal steroids. So these are the biochemical changes happening in primary, secondary and tertiary adrenal insufficiency. Now we move on to the pathophysiology of adrenal insufficiency. The basic causes which we have seen in primary, secondary and tertiary are categorized by the mechanism through which they cause the adrenal glands to produce insufficient steroid hormones. These are basically three mechanisms are responsible for all the causes. It is the categorization. First is the adrenal dysgenesis. Second is impaired steroidogenesis, and third is adrenal destruction. In the first, in adrenal dysgenesis, the gland has not formed adequately during the development. That means when the gland is forming inside the uterus, there is some mutation happened so that the gland has not formed adequately. And in second, impaired steroidogenesis, there is some problem with the synthesis of steroid hormones. The gland is present normally, but biochemically unable to produce cortisol due to some enzymatic deficiencies, like as in congenital adrenal hyperplasia, so as to produce adequate amounts of cortisol, aldosterone and androgens. The gland is there, but the mechanisms are not happening properly. And third, in the adrenal destruction, some disease processes are leading to glandular damage. The disease may be autoimmune, it may be inflammatory, it may be tuberculosis, it may be some kind of metastasis happening. So any kind of disease process which is destroying the adrenal gland will lead to adrenal insufficiency. So first we will discuss the primary adrenal insufficiency, that means causes in the adrenal gland, and there is increased ACTH. Right? The most common causes are autoimmune, which is also known as Addison's disease. Right? Second is tuberculosis of the adrenal gland, HIV. Fourth is metastatic carcinoma, that means some kind of carcinoma. Primary focus is somewhere else and the disease has metastasized to the adrenal glands. And the last common cause is bilateral adrenalectomy, that means there is increased or enough amounts of ACTH, but due to some disease process the adrenals have been removed, so there is adrenal insufficiency. And other causes which are rarer are lymphomas, intraadrenal hemorrhage is also known as Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome, following meningococcal septicemia, that means some kind of hemorrhage is happening in the adrenal glands. Amyloidosis, in which there is deposits of amyloid in the adrenal gland, and hemochromatosis, in which there are iron deposits in the adrenal gland so as to interfere with the mechanisms of steroidogenesis. So there is also pictorial representation you can see. The first is for autoimmune, that is some autoantibodies are present as in the Addison's disease. Second is tuberculosis, some tubercular foci. Primary may be inside the lungs, but secondary metastasis of tuberculous focus from primary to adrenal glands. Third is AIDS, and fourth is metastatic carcinoma. and this fifth is showing the laser bilateral adrenalectomy operation, right? These are the common causes and these are the rare causes. Another rare cause is corticosteroid biosynthetic enzyme defects, as in congenital adrenal hyperplasias. The gland is present, but there is some interference or there are some defects in the enzymes which leads to the synthesis of cortisol, aldosterone and androgens, and some drugs which may hamper with these steroidogenesis, that are aminoglutathione, metyrocone, ketoconazole, etimodate, etc. Now from primary, we move on to the secondary adrenal insufficiency, in which the cause lies outside the adrenal gland with decreased amounts of ACTH. That means problem is in the pituitary, anterior pituitary disease, some kind of adenoma, which is causing the decreased secretion of ACTH. Sheehan syndrome, in which there is pituitary necrosis after the severe postpartum hemorrhage. The pituitary necrosis will lead to the suppression of ACTH from the corticotrophs present in the anterior pituitary gland. In tertiary, the cause is also outside the adrenal gland, especially in the hypothalamus, causing decreased secretion of corticotropin releasing hormone. So hypothalamic or pituitary disease, if CRH is decreased, so ACTH will be decreased, and as a consequence, the steroid hormones will be decreased. And another cause is withdrawal of suppressive glucocorticoid therapy. The presentation, as we have discussed in the earlier slides also, can be acute as well as chronic. Right, the acute presentation is also known as Addisonian crisis. Right, it is an acute medical emergency and potentially life-threatening situation requiring immediate emergency treatment. The crisis is often precipitated by sudden withdrawal of corticosteroids, Waterhouse-Friderichsen syndrome, that is the intra-adrenal hemorrhage, some kind of intercurrent disease like tuberculosis, some kind of surgery or infection, and stress in people with underlying chronic adrenal insufficiency. Right? So these causes can cause acute attack of adrenal insufficiency. And second is the chronic presentation, the examples of which are Addison's disease, tuberculosis, AIDS, and metastatic disease. Right? And minor causes are systemic amyloidosis, fungal infections, hemochromatosis, and sarcoidosis. Hemochromatosis, we have discussed that it is iron deposits in the adrenal gland, thus damaging the adrenal gland. And sarcoidosis, symptoms due to aldosterone insufficiency. Now, what kind of symptoms will occur due to aldosterone insufficiency? If the zona glomerulosa layer is damaged, which secretes the mineralocorticoids, mainly aldosterone, it will lead to decreased aldosterone. If zona glomerulosa is destroyed, the aldosterone decreases. So, what is the function of aldosterone? Is to maintain sodium and water balance in the body, sodium and potassium balance and water balance, as well as the hydrogen ions. So, it will cause hyponatremia, that is decreased amounts of sodium in the blood, hyperkalemia, that is increased amounts of potassium in the blood, hypovolemia, that means the dehydration or increased removal of water, through urine, and acidosis, that is increased hydrogen ions inside the body. So there will be cravings for salty food due to hyponatremia, nausea, vomiting, fatigue, dizziness, and cramps. This picture is also showing the person may experience some personality changes like confusion or short temper. He will be easily fatigued. There might be convulsions or seizures or cramps in the calves. There is loss of consciousness and coma, low blood pressure, or orthostatic hypotension due to hyponatremia. So, due to increased amounts of potassium, that is hyperkalemia, the patient will experience malaise, muscle weakness, and palpitations. Due to hyponatremia, that is decreased amounts of sodium in the blood, the patient will experience nausea, vomiting, headache, short-term memory loss, confusion, lethargy, fatigue, loss of appetite, muscle weakness, spasms or cramps, seizures, decreased consciousness, and coma. Due to hypovolemia, he will experience tachycardia, diminished blood pressure, pallor, increased thirst, dizziness, fainting, nausea, absence of perfusion as assessed by capillary refill on forehead, lips, and nail bed. Hypercalcemia due to combination of increased calcium input into extracellular space and reduced calcium removal by kidney due to decreased GFR. Right. So these are the symptoms due to aldosterone insufficiency. Symptoms due to cortisol insufficiency are: the cortisol is secreted from the zona fasciculata layer, which secretes glucocorticoids maintaining the glucose homeostasis in the body, and the main hormone is cortisol. So when zona fasciculata is destroyed, the cortisol is decreased, and so there is low blood glucose in times of stress, and the patient will feel weak, tired, and disoriented. He will feel headachy, sweaty, shaky. He will be very hungry, confused, dizzy, and grumpy. So if zona reticularis secreting androgen layer is destroyed, the androgens will decrease. In males, there will be no impact as major source is testosterone, but in females, there is loss of armpit and pubic hair, and there is loss of libido. Now, symptoms due to ACTH increase. ACTH increase is seen only in the primary causes of adrenal insufficiency, in which there is adrenal gland damage, but the pituitary and hypothalamus is normal, secreting normal amounts of CRH and ACTH. So, the increased ACTH, as it have the structure similar to melanocyte stimulating hormone. The basic mother protein is POMC, which breaks down to form ACTH and MSH. So the mother is basically POMC and the two siblings ACTH and MSH, that is adrenocorticotrophin hormone and melanocyte stimulating hormone. The two have similar structures. So the increased amounts of ACTH are able to stimulate the melanocytes due to its similarity with melanocyte stimulating hormone, right? So if it will stimulate the melanocytes, it will cause hyperpigmentation, right? So bronze colored pigmentation, particularly when patient lives in a sunny area. If the patient live in tropical area or in which there is sun shines a lot, sun exposure is a lot, so the patient will experience darkening of palmar creases, darkening of nipples, buccal mucosa, sites of friction, recent scars, vermilion border of the lips, knees, knuckles, and genital skin. This occurs because FSH and ACTH share the same precursor molecule, POMC, that is pro-opiomelanocortin. Right? The skin darkening does not happen due to secondary causes because ACTH is decreased. In secondary causes, in which pituitary and hypothalamus are affected, there is decreased ACTH along with the decreased adrenal hormone. So in that, there will not be hyperpigmentation. So vitiligo occurs in 10 to 20% of patients with autoimmune Addison's disease. Right? So you can see in this picture, it is a picture of a 57-year-old woman presenting with symptoms of primary adrenal insufficiency secondary to autoimmune Addison's disease. So you can see the pigmentation on the face and the nose area, right? And in the chin and the upper lip area. The hands demonstrate the darkened palmar creases, right? And wrists are also darkened in comparison with this normal hand. Normal hand, you can see. Right? This is the normal hand, and in this there is darkened palmar creases. And with long-term hormone replacement, this dark palmar creases were gone and the normal appearance presented. And it also shows the requirement of a steroid bracelet which is worn by the patient, which shows if there is some emergency occurring, the emergency doctors will know that the patient requires the hormone replacement, and the patient might be undergoing adrenal insufficiency, which is very fatal condition. So the steroid bracelet is mandatory for patients with adrenal insufficiency. So you can see the facial darkening on the nose, on the cheeks, on the upper lip and chin area, darkened palmar creases, and the requirement of the steroid bracelet. This slide also shows hyperpigmentation due to increased ACTH. The areas of friction, that is the elbow joints, darkened palmar creases, and the wrist area. If the person is using the mouse and working as an IT professional or using a lot of computer and using the mouse, the wrists are the major site of friction. Major site of friction due to movement of the mouse, right? So he can experience darkening of the wrist area, darkening of gum line, and vitiligo may be there in patients due to, or it is also an autoimmune condition, and Addison's disease is also an autoimmune condition. So there are patches of hypopigmentation and hyperpigmentation occurring simultaneously in a patient. So this is a pictorial representation of the symptoms of the Addison's disease. It is called Addison's disease on the name of physician Thomas Addison. Bronze pigmentation of skin. The skin is shown as darkened hair, and there are changes in distribution of body hair. Why? There might be increased pigmentation in the upper lip and chin area, but there are changes in distribution of body hair, that is falling off armpit hair and pubic hair, and there is hypoglycemia, that is decreased amounts of glucose in the blood, postural hypotension, that is when the patient changes the posture, we will experience vertigo and decreased amounts of blood volume, and there is weight loss due to dehydration. There might be GI disturbances like nausea and vomiting, and there is profound weakness due to these electrolyte changes that is happening inside the body, that is the hyponatremia, hyperkalemia, and acidosis. The renal shutdown will happen, and there is total vascular collapse. This is also a good picture. It is a kind of a mnemonic showing from A, it is ACTH excess, and also autoimmune destruction. Addison's disease is an autoimmune disease, right? There is abdominal pain, nausea and vomiting from A, and the test is ACTH stimulation test with low cortisols, right? ACTH coming from POMC. Increased ACTH will cause darkening of skin from D, darkening of skin, right? And this arrow showing decreased amounts of cortisol. From S, there is salt cravings and stress. From O, there is orthostatic hypotension. And from N, that is low sodium, hyponatremia. So, this is a good pictorial representation to remember the Addison's disease. The salient features are shown. The mnemonic for Addison disease is, you can write down in a notebook for easily remembering the characteristics of Addison's disease. From A, there is ACTH excess, adenoma pituitary, autoimmune etiology, ACTH excess, and ACTH stimulation test, abdominal pains with nausea and vomiting. D is for darkened skin, that is hyperpigmentation and deficiency of hormones. D is for destruction of adrenal gland, dehydration, decreased glucose or energy. From I, increased potassium, that is hyperkalemia. From S, salt cravings and stress. From O, orthostatic hypotension. From N, sodium decreased. Na is for sodium, sodium decreased, right? So you can write it down somewhere so that during revision, it is easier for you to remember the Addison's disease. And mnemonics to remember Cushing's and Addison's. In Cushing, there is increased amounts of hormone cortisol. So from C, cut the hormones because there is increased amounts of hormones. So you have to reduce the levels of the hormones. And in Addison's, you have to add the hormones because in this, there is deficiency of hormones. So it is an C to cut, and Addison's means adding the hormones. There are actually opposites of each other. Cushing's and Addison's are opposites of each other. Right? So in this slide, we can compare the Addison disease and Cushing syndrome. In Cushing syndrome, we have discussed in the earlier lecture, there is thinning of scalp hair due to proteolysis, and there is emotional instability due to dopamine changes, and acne due to androgen excess. There are moon facies due to deposits of fats in the cheeks. But in Addison's disease, there is hollowing of cheeks or cachexia may be present. The skin is darkened in Addison's disease, but there might be pallor in Cushing's disease. There is increased facial hair in Cushing's disease, but no facial hairs and no armpit or pubic hair also in case of Addison's disease. The body hair distribution is changed in Addison's disease, right? In Cushing syndrome, there is buffalo hump due to increased amounts of fat deposits, but not present in Addison's disease, right? And anorexia, nausea, and vomiting might be there in Addison's disease. There is osteoporosis with compression fractures in the vertebral column, and there might be bowing of the spine, right? So kyphosis or scoliosis might be present in Cushing syndrome, but not in Addison's disease. In Addison's disease, hyperpigmentation is present. In Cushing syndrome, hypertension is present. In Addison's disease, hypotension is present, right? In Cushing disease, adrenal hyperplasia or tumor might be present. In this, adrenal atrophy is present or destruction, that is autoimmune disease might be present. Some kind of infection may be there. Some kind of tumor may be there. Some kind of metastasis may be there. Tuberculosis deposits might be there. Hemochromatosis might be there. So in adrenal, the changes are clear. Truncal obesity is seen in Cushing syndrome, and thinning of arms and legs are seen. Centripetal obesity, that is increased amounts of fats in the visceral area but decreased amounts of fats from the extremities, is present in the Cushing syndrome, and it is typical of Cushing syndrome along with the moon facies, but not so in case of Addison's disease. There might be thinning due to dehydration, due to diarrhea, due to nausea, vomiting. So there might be weight loss in Addison's disease, weight gain in Cushing syndrome, and weight loss in Addison's disease. In Cushing syndrome, there is increased amounts of glucose in the blood, that is hyperglycemia. And in Addison's disease, there is hypoglycemia, right? In Addison's disease, there is hyponatremia. In Cushing syndrome, there might be hypernatremia. The muscle are wasted with proximal myopathy, weakness and thin extremities due to proteolysis. And diabetes mellitus, poor wound healing with easy bruising might be there in Cushing syndrome, but not present in Addison's disease. So these are just opposites of each other. Addison's disease, in these there is deficiency of hormones, and Cushing syndrome, in this there is excess of hormones. One is called hypocortilism and another is called hypercortilism. These pictures are also showing the same thing which we have seen in the earlier slide. So we now move on to the investigations of adrenal insufficiency. In chronic presentation, first investigations have to be done, then the treatment has to be done. But in acute crisis, as it is an emergency, first treatment has to be done, then investigations. Treatment on the basis of suspicion. If fatigue is present, hypotension is present, hyponatremia is present, cramps are there. So first treatment has to be done, then the investigations will be done. A random blood sample should be stored for the measurement of cortisol. It may be appropriate to spend 30 minutes performing a short ACTH simulation test before administering hydrocortisone, but investigations may need to be delayed until after recovery. That means the blood sample is taken and stored to measure the cortisol levels, right? and it is appropriate to spend 30 minutes performing the short ACTS stimulation test. The ACTS stimulation test is of two types, short test as well as the long test. So it takes only 30 minutes to do a short ACTS stimulation test, so it can be done in an emergency condition before administering hydrocortisone. But other investigations may need to be delayed until after the recovery of the patient. To diagnose this disease, that is the adrenal insufficiency, we need to assess the ACTH amounts, the glucocorticoids, that is cortisol, mineralocorticoids, that is aldosterone and androgens. Also, these electrolytes, sodium, potassium and calcium, needs to be measured. FBCs, full blood count to screen for pernicious anemia. Pernicious anemia often present along with this disease, and fasting blood sugar and postprandial blood sugar. Thyroid profile should be done to see to know any doubts about whether hyperthyroidism might be present. In that also there is weight loss, right? Antibodies measured against steroid secreting cells, adrenals and gonads, right? Thyroid antigens should be done. Pancreatic beta cells and parietal cells should be done to know the autoimmune conditions. Then X-ray chest as well as X-ray of adrenals should be done to see the calcification or the cavity in tuberculosis. The CT scan and MRI to rule out the malignancy and the pituitary causes. There might be some pituitary adenoma or some craniopharyngioma or some disease in hypothalamus can be ruled out by CT and MRI. And HIV testing should be done, the ELISA test, to rule out HIV/AIDS. Assessment of glucocorticoids, that is assessment of the cortisol. The random plasma cortisol, usually low to normal range, yet inappropriately low for a seriously ill patient. Therefore, it cannot be used to confirm or refute the diagnosis unless the value is high, that means more than 460 nanomoles per liter. Right. Usually the plasma cortisol is present in low to normal range, but inappropriately low for seriously ill patient. So it cannot be used alone to make the diagnosis. ACTH stimulation test is required to diagnose the adrenal insufficiency. The basal cortisol on 2 different days between 8 to 9 hours. The cortisol levels are measured on 2 different days, right? In the morning hours from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Right? If it is more than 500 nanomoles per liter, then adrenal insufficiency is unlikely and no further dynamic testing is required. That means no further ACTH stimulation test is required if the values are above 500. If the values are between 100 to 500 nanomoles per liter, then 1 μg ACTH test, any time point, sampling at 0 hours, at 20 minutes and at 30 minutes. The cutoff is 500 nanomoles per liter, right? If the value comes between 100 to 500, then post-stimulation cortisol is less than 500 nanomoles per liter, adrenal insufficiency is very likely. If the cortisol values comes to be 100 to 500, then the ACTH stimulation test is done. And if after stimulating by ACTH, if the cortisol remains lower than 500, that means adrenal insufficiency is very much likely to be present. And if the cortisol values are less than 100 nanomoles per liter, that means AI is confirmed by basal ACTH on ice. On ice means at 0 levels, at 0 hours. to differentiate between primary and secondary adrenal insufficiency. If the cortisol values are less than 100, then ACTH values are seen to differentiate. If there is low ACTH present, that means the cause is in the pituitary or hypothalamus. And if high excess ACTH is present, that means the cause is primary, right? Now we move on to ACTH stimulation test in details. The short ACTH stimulation test, also known as tetraposactide or short synectin test. The synectin is synthetic ACTH, right? Cortisol levels fail to increase in response to exogenous ACTH. The synectin is exogenous ACTH and the cortisol levels will fail to increase in its response in patients with primary or secondary adrenal insufficiency. In both the causes, in primary as well as secondary, the cortisol levels will not rise, right? These can be distinguished by measurement of ACTH. Now, to distinguish, firstly, the cortisol levels are low, and second step is to measure the levels of ACTH. If the ACTH is high, the cause is primary, and if ACTH values are low, the cause is secondary or tertiary. The dose of synectin is 250 μg ACTH synectin by intramuscular injection at any time of the day. So in short synectin test, first we measure the blood cortisol at the baseline, then after 30 minutes of giving the synectin, then after 60 minutes of giving the synectin drug, and in 60 minutes we expect cortisol to double in a normal patient. Right? Increase in cortisol to double excludes adrenal insufficiency. That means the patient is normal if the cortisol is doubled. But if it does not double or no increase in cortisol means adrenal insufficiency. It is distinguished into primary and secondary by ACTH assay. Right? By knowing the values of ACTH, we will know whether it is primary or secondary. Now, what is the use of ACTH stimulation test? The first use is diagnosis of primary or secondary adrenal insufficiency. Right? Then assessment of hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis in patients taking suppressive glucocorticoid therapy. The patients who are taking some exogenous steroids. So to assess the HPA axis in these patients, and ACTH stimulation test relies on ACTH dependent adrenal atrophy in secondary adrenal insufficiency. So may not detect acute ACTH deficiency. Example in pituitary apoplexy. So what happens that the ACTH dependent adrenal atrophy in secondary adrenal insufficiency. In secondary adrenal insufficiency, what happens? There is ACTH is low. So if there is decreased ACTH, it will not stimulate the adrenal gland. So adrenal gland will have functional atrophy in the long run. So it may not detect the acute ACTH deficiency. If there is some kind of acute ACTH deficiency happening, so it will not be detected, as in pituitary apoplexy, in which there is some kind of infarction in pituitary. In this also there will be decreased ACTH, and so, but adrenal atrophy will not be present in that. Right? This is the normal HPA axis, the hypothalamus secreting releasing hormone, that is corticotrophin releasing hormone, stimulating the anterior pituitary gland, releasing ACTH, and ACTH stimulating the adrenal gland, this pyramidal, flattened pyramidal shaped adrenal gland, releasing cortisol, which has negative feedback for pituitary as well as hypothalamus. This is the normal HPA axis, HPA. H is for hypothalamus, P is for pituitary, and A is for adrenal gland. So first, we will test the cortisol hormones that are less in all the three causes. Then we will do the ACTH stimulation test to stimulate these to know whether primary or secondary causes are there. So if the cortisol gets doubled, that means in 60 minutes, that means the person is normal, right? Then we do the ACTH assay. If ACTH is increased, that means at the baseline or at the eyes, that means there is some primary cause, there is some tumor, adenoma or hyperplasia in pituitary. And if there is decreased ACTH, that means there may be problem in hypothalamus or in some pituitary receptors, right? Or destruction in pituitary gland, right? And in tertiary, there might be tumor in the hypothalamus. It suppresses the CRH. Decreased amounts of CRH will cause decreased amounts of ACTH and decreased amounts of adrenal steroids, right? The long ACTH stimulation test, if an ACTH assay is unavailable, then long ACTH stimulation test can be used. In long ACTH stimulation test, 1 mg depot ACTH intramuscularly daily for 3 days, right? In secondary adrenal insufficiency, there is progressive increase in plasma cortisol with repeated ACTH administration. That is, with repeated ACTH administration, the plasma cortisol will increase in secondary adrenal insufficiency, in which there is already the ACTH quantities are decreased in amounts. So with exogenous ACTH, the plasma cortisol will increase. Whereas in Addison's disease, in which the adrenal glands are damaged, the cortisol will remain less than 700 nanomoles per liter at 8 hours after the last injection, right? So in secondary, after ACTH administration, the plasma cortisol will increase, but in Addison's disease, it will remain less than 700 nanomoles. So in this, for 3 days, ACTH is given intramuscularly. In short ACTH stimulation test, the samples are taken at 0 hours, at 30 minutes and 60 minutes. That means in 1 hour, the conclusion can be made. But in long ACTH stimulation test, we need 3 days to make an interpretation. In a patient who is already receiving glucocorticoids, that means the patient is already have cortisol. The short ACTH stimulation test can be performed first thing in the morning, more than 12 hours after the last dose of glucocorticoids. That means the 12 hours of fasting is there. If the patient one day before takes the drug at 9 p.m. and we do the test at 9 a.m. in the morning, so 12 hours has lapsed between the last dose of glucocorticoid. Then the first thing in the morning is blood sample collection in these patients, or the treatment can be changed to synthetic steroids such as dexamethasone, 0.75 mg daily. Normally, the patients who receive glucocorticoids take prednisolone. So, in these patients, prednisolone can be changed to dexamethasone, so that it will not cross-react with the plasma cortisol immunoassay. Now, after the assessment of glucocorticoids, we move on to the assessment of mineralocorticoids. That is the aldosterone. For this aldosterone, we have done the lecture for renin-angiotensin aldosterone system in the previous lecture. So to assess the mineralocorticoids, you must know the levels of renin, of aldosterone both. So the plasma renin activity will be high. Due to increased amounts of dehydration, the kidney will sense the hypovolemia and will respond by releasing increased amounts of renin in the blood. So plasma renin activity will be high and plasma aldosterone will be low or in the lower part of the normal range. The plasma renin activity and aldosterone should be measured in the supine position. And the plasma electrolyte measurements are insufficient to assess the mineralocorticoid secretion in patients with suspected Addison's disease. That means the values of sodium and potassium are insufficient to assess the secretion of aldosterone in patients with suspected Addison's disease, as hyponatremia occurs in both aldosterone as well as cortisol deficiency, and hyperkalemia is common but not universal in aldosterone deficiency. Also, we have to do the assessment of adrenal androgens. It is not necessary in men because the testosterone from testes is the principal androgen. But in women, dehydroepiandrosterone and androstenedione may be measured in a random specimen of blood whose levels are highest in the morning. In women, there is loss of body hair and loss of libido. So DHEA can be measured in a random specimen of blood, though levels are highest in the morning. So these are the normal values. The normal values of the hormone ACTH is 1.5 to 11.2 picomoles per liter. You can note it down somewhere in your notebook. Aldosterone is measured in supine as well as in erect position. In supine, at least 30 minutes the patient should be lying down, and the values are 30 to 440 picomoles per liter. And the aldosterone is also measured in the standing position at least 1 hour. The values are 110 to 860 picomoles per liter. And the cortisol, for cortisol, dynamic tests are required. That is because it is a diurnal hormone, its values are highest in the morning and lowest at the midnight. So dynamic test, that is the ACTH stimulation test, is required, or urinary pre-cortisol is done, and salivary cortisol can be taken. And for renin, both supine in sitting as well as for standing, the values are 5 to 40 microunits per liter. And for sitting also, it is similar to the supine values. And for standing, 16 to 63 microunits per liter. The normal levels of androgens, that is DHA, can differ by the gender, and the typical normal ranges for female are for 18 to 19, 145, 395, for 20, 29 to 65, for 30, 39, 30 to 39, 45 to 270 μg, for ages 40 to 49, 32 to 240 micrograms per deciliter. So these are the typical normal ranges for female. And for ages 69 and older, 17 to 90 μg per deciliter. For electrolytes, sodium 135 to 145 millimoles per liter. For potassium, 3.6 to 5 millimoles per liter. And for calcium, 2.1 to 2.6 millimoles per liter. These are the normal values. To know the abnormal values, we must know the normal values first. So in adrenal insufficiency, as the hormones are deficient, so the management is done with hormone replacement therapy. So the patients with adrenocortical insufficiency always need glucocorticoid replacement therapy, and usually but not always mineralocorticoids. That means cortisol is needed, right? Mineralocorticoid aldosterone is not usually required, but cortisol is needed very much. And adrenal androgen replacement for women is not usually employed because, but there is some evidence that adrenal androgen replacement may be beneficial in women because in menopause, after menopause, the androgens are required to maintain the estrogen values. And other treatments depend on the underlying cause. Other treatments depend on the underlying cause. If the cause is tuberculosis, so anti-tubercular treatment is required. If some autoimmune disease is there, so accordingly, the treatment is required. If AIDS is there, then treatment is different. If some kind of infection is there, then the antibiotic regime has to be taken. So, depending upon the cause, the treatment, other treatments are given. In management of the adrenal crisis, that means the acute presentation, we have to correct the volume depletion as there is hypovolemia due to dehydration, nausea and vomiting, IV saline to normalize BP and pulse. In severe hyponatremia, avoid increase of plasma sodium to more than 10 millimoles per day per liter to prevent the pontine degeneration. If more than this value is given, then the pontine degeneration might happen as a side effect. And to replace the glucocorticoids, that means intravenous hydrocortisone succinate 100 mg, correction of metabolic abnormalities, that is the hypoglycemia, 10% dextrose,